It's funny how life works sometimes. You think you know someone, especially when you've spent years building a life together. You trust them completely, and in your mind, there's no way they could ever betray you. I used to think that way about Lisa. We had our ups and downs, but who doesn't, right? That's what marriage is all about. You work through the tough times, and you stick by each other's side. I always believed in loyalty. It's one of those values I grew up with, something that was ingrained in me from the start. You stand by the people you love, no matter what. And I always thought Lisa shared that same belief. She seemed like the perfect wife. We had this connection, this understanding that we'd always have each other's backs. And that's all I ever wanted, really. A simple life, filled with love, loyalty, and trust. I didn't need anything flashy. I just wanted to be with a woman who would love me the same way I loved her. That's what I dreamed about. Happiness until the very end. Growing old together, sitting on the porch with our grandkids running around. It was a dream I held on to, and I thought Lisa was part of that dream. But then, things started to change. Little things at first. She became distant. Not the same affectionate woman I had known for so many years. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a rough patch. I told myself, there's no way Lisa would ever cheat on me. She's not that type of woman. But deep down, I felt something gnawing at me. It didn't help that our financial situation wasn't great. I always felt like I wasn't providing enough, like I wasn't successful enough. Maybe that's what started pushing us apart. I don't know. But there I was, feeling like I didn't have the money, the status, or the success that other guys had. And that kind of thing wears you down over time. It eats at your self-esteem, makes you question everything. Yet, despite all of that, I never thought it would come to this. I never thought Lisa would be capable of… Well, I couldn't even bring myself to finish the thought back then. My emotions were all over the place. I wanted to trust her, but my gut was telling me something was wrong. Was I being paranoid? Was this just my insecurities talking? Or was there really something happening that I wasn't seeing? I had so many doubts swirling in my head, but I kept telling myself, no, Lisa wouldn't do that. She couldn't. But that suspicion kept growing, and I couldn't shake it. I felt like I was caught in this never-ending loop of questioning everything. Our marriage, my worth, her loyalty. It was exhausting, and I didn't know how much longer I could ignore it. You know, at first, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I kept telling myself, it's nothing. Couples go through phases, right? But after a while, it got harder to ignore. Lisa wasn't just distant. She was cold. The kind of cold that leaves you feeling alone, even when you're in the same room. I tried to brush it off as stress. I mean, we both had a lot on our plate, with work and the bills piling up. Maybe she just needed some space. But then came the nights where she stayed out late, much later than she used to. I'd ask her where she was, and her answers were always the same. Out with friends, working late. At first, I believed her, because why wouldn't I? She had never given me a reason to doubt her before. But as time went on, I couldn't help but feel like there was more to the story. It wasn't just the late nights. It was everything. The way she stopped looking at me the same way. The way she pulled away whenever I tried to be close. We hadn't been intimate in, 2 months? Maybe more. Every time I tried to initiate something, there was always an excuse. I'm tired. Not tonight. Maybe tomorrow. At first, I tried to be understanding. I mean, relationships go through dry spells, but this felt different. This wasn't just a dry spell. This was a complete withdrawal. It's like she built a wall between us, and I had no idea why. I wanted to talk to her about it, But every time I thought about bringing it up, I stopped myself. What if I was overreacting? What if this was all just in my head? I didn't want to accuse her of something that wasn't happening. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. I was trapped between wanting to trust her, because trust was everything in our relationship, and this gnawing fear that something had changed. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that Lisa could be hiding something from me, but the distance, the late nights, the coldness, it all added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. I started noticing every little thing. The way she was always on her phone, how she'd leave the room when she took a call. She wasn't laughing at my jokes anymore, not even the ones that used to make her burst out in tears. Our conversations became shorter, more distant. She wasn't sharing her day with me like she used to. It felt like I was talking to a stranger. And that's when it hit me. Something had changed, and I didn't know what. But I knew I had to find out. I had to stop pretending everything was fine, because it wasn't. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was yet. I've always been the type to keep things private. Whatever issues Lisa and I had, I thought we could sort them out between us. But when things started getting worse, when she became practically unreachable, I found myself needing answers that I couldn't get from her. I didn't want to believe what was happening, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on behind my back. One night, when Lisa was out again, I found myself pacing the living room, my mind running in circles. I couldn't stand it anymore, the not knowing, the second guessing. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went over to my neighbor's house. It wasn't like I was particularly close to any of my neighbors, but we'd lived in the same neighborhood long enough that we knew each other's routines. If something strange was going on, I figured they'd notice. I stood on the porch, hesitating for a moment. This felt wrong, like I was crossing a line, but I needed to know. So I knocked. When my neighbor, Susan, answered, I felt a rush of awkwardness. How do you even start a conversation like this? Hey, have you seen my wife around with someone else? That's not something you ask lightly. But after some polite chit-chat, I managed to work up the nerve to ask, Susan, I know this might sound weird, but have you noticed anything, off with Lisa lately? Maybe seen her with anyone I don't know? The look on Susan's face told me everything. She froze for a second, glanced away, and that's when I knew. She knew something. She wasn't just going to brush it off with a casual, "No, I haven't seen anything." Her hesitation hit me like a gut punch. Then she sighed, and that's when my heart sank. Well, Michael, I didn't want to be the one to say anything, but I've seen her around with someone, a man. I didn't think it was my place to say anything, but I thought you knew. Thought I knew. What was I supposed to know? My stomach tightened. The room felt like it was spinning, and I could barely process what she was saying. All I heard was, a man. I thanked her, but I barely remember walking back to my house. My mind was racing, and all I could think about was who this man could be. Was it just a friend? Was I blowing this out of proportion? But then the reality hit me like a brick. Susan wouldn't have reacted that way if it were nothing. I was standing there, in the middle of my living room, feeling like my world had just cracked wide open. I didn't know what to do next. Do I confront Lisa right away? Do I wait and see if it happens again? My head was spinning with questions, but none of them had any easy answers. It was like everything was crashing down around me, and I didn't even know how to pick up the pieces. I thought hearing the truth would make things clearer, but it only left me more confused, more hurt, and more lost. I sat there for what felt like hours, I mean, what do you even do with news like that? My mind was running a mile a minute, trying to piece together what Susan had said, trying to make sense of it all. But no matter how I turned it over in my head, it didn't make sense. This was Lisa. My Lisa. The woman I'd been through everything with. She couldn't, she wouldn't. Denial. That's what hit me first. I just couldn't accept it. There had to be some kind of mistake, right? Maybe Susan misunderstood. Maybe the guy she saw Lisa with was just a colleague or an old friend. It didn't have to mean what I was thinking. I kept trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that there was some other explanation. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more I started to feel like I was just fooling myself. Deep down, there was this sinking feeling in my gut, and it wasn't going away. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Susan's hesitation, the look in her eyes when she told me, those weren't the signs of someone making a mistake. She knew what she saw, and the way she said it. I could tell she didn't want to hurt me, but the truth was out there now, whether I wanted to believe it or not. But still, I clung to that last shred of hope. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe if I just talked to Lisa, she'd explain everything, and this would all blow over. But every time I thought about asking her, my stomach tightened, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. The thought of confronting her terrified me. What if she admitted it? What if she didn't even bother lying? What if this man, whoever he was, had already taken my place? And I was just the last to know. My head was spinning with all these horrible thoughts, but I couldn't make any of them stop. It was easier to stay in denial, to keep pretending everything was fine, even though I knew in my heart that it wasn't. I was stuck, trapped between the truth and the lies I was telling myself. And as much as I wanted to hold on to the life I thought I had, I could feel it slipping away, piece by piece. I wasn't ready to face it. I wasn't ready to face her. But deep down, I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. After hearing what Susan had told me, I couldn't stop my mind from going down this dark spiral. It wasn't just about Lisa anymore, it was about me. Who was I really? I couldn't shake this overwhelming sense of failure. Was it me that pushed her away? Had I not been good enough? All those insecurities I'd buried over the years came flooding back. The doubts, the nagging voice in the back of my head that always told me I wasn't successful enough, that I didn't have enough money or status to really keep her happy. Maybe that was why this was happening. Maybe I hadn't provided the kind of life she deserved. I wasn't some big shot with a fancy job or a fat bank account. I was just me. I started to look at myself differently. Every flaw, every shortcoming seemed magnified. I'd been struggling financially for a while, just trying to make ends meet. And sure, I was doing my best, but was my best enough? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe she was tired of waiting for things to get better. Maybe she found someone who could offer her more, someone who had everything I didn't. I kept thinking back to my past relationships, to all the times things didn't work out. It was always the same story, never good enough, never the guy with the flash or the status. It felt like every failure in my past had been leading up to this moment, proving that maybe I was the problem all along. And now, here I was, watching my marriage fall apart and wondering if I ever stood a chance to begin with. I felt so small, so powerless, like no matter how hard I tried, it was never going to be enough. And maybe Lisa had realized that too. Maybe that's why she turned to someone else. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing all my failures staring back at me. Every missed opportunity, every time I fell short, it all hit me at once. The worst part? I couldn't even blame her. How could I? When I couldn't stop blaming myself, I couldn't avoid it any longer. The weight of everything had become too much to carry, and I knew I had to confront Lisa. Every time I thought about it, my heart would start pounding, my throat would tighten, but I had no choice. I had to know the truth. One evening, after she came home, I waited until we were alone in the kitchen. My mind was racing, but I tried to stay calm. I had rehearsed what I was going to say over and over, but as soon as I opened my mouth, it all came out in a rush. "Lisa, we need to talk. I know something's going on. I've noticed you've been distant, and I talked to Susan. She said she's seen you with someone." The moment the words left my mouth, I could see her face change. It was subtle, but it was there. A flicker of something, like she wasn't expecting me to find out. She didn't answer right away, just stood there, her eyes darting around like she was searching for the right thing to say. "Michael, she started, but then stopped, her voice shaky. I felt a lump in my throat as I waited for her to continue, but she didn't. "What's going on, Lisa? I need to know the truth," I said, my voice breaking just a little. She sighed, looking away from me, and that's when I knew. She didn't have to say anything. Her silence, the way she couldn't meet my eyes, it told me everything I needed to know, but I still needed to hear it from her. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice quieter now, almost pleading. "Are you seeing someone else?" There was a long pause, and then finally, she nodded. It was like the world stopped for a moment. My heart sank, and everything inside me just crumbled. I don't know what I was expecting, but hearing her admit it made it all too real. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice trembling. It just happened." I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was drowning, like I couldn't breathe. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, how could she just throw it all away like that? "Why?" I finally managed to ask, though I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear the answer. Lisa didn't look at me. "I don't know. Things haven't been the same between us, and I was lonely. I didn't want to hurt you." I almost laughed at that. Didn't want to hurt me. It was too late for that. The conversation kept going, but at some point, I stopped hearing the words. It didn't matter anymore. All I knew was that the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with had betrayed me, and I didn't know what to do next. After the conversation with Lisa, everything felt different. It was like the air had changed in the house, like the walls were closing in around me. I didn't know how to handle it. One moment I was angry, furious even, and the next I just felt empty. I kept replaying everything in my head. The years we spent together, the memories we made, the vacations, the laughter, the little inside jokes only we understood. I used to think we had something special, something no one could take away. But now, it all felt like a lie. Every happy moment we'd shared felt tainted, like a shadow had been cast over our entire history. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream and yell and tell her how much she'd hurt me. But at the same time, I still loved her. And that's what made it all so much worse. How could I love someone who did this to me? How could I want to hold on to something that was already broken beyond repair? I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions I'd never get answers to. Why did she do it? What was it about him? Was I really that easy to replace? Was there something I could have done differently to stop this from happening? Every time I thought I was starting to make sense of it, another wave of heartbreak would hit me. I didn't know whether to forgive her, to try and rebuild what we had, or to walk away and never look back. Part of me wanted to hold on, to fight for us, but another part of me knew that things would never be the same. The trust was gone. That was the hardest part. I couldn't look at Lisa the same way, even when she tried to apologize, tried to explain herself. All I could think about was how she'd lied to me, how she'd gone behind my back, made me feel like I was the problem, when all along, it was her who had been hiding something. It felt like a battle was going on inside me. One side wanted to move on, to let go of the pain and start over, but the other side, it didn't want to give up on the life we'd built together. I was torn, stuck in this limbo of heartbreak, not knowing how to move forward or how to let go. After the shock and the anger started to settle, I found myself standing at a crossroads. Do I stay? Do I try to fix this? Or do I walk away and start over? I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to make a choice like this. It was terrifying. The idea of leaving, of ending everything we'd built together, scared me. I had gotten so used to our life, our routines, our shared dreams, the familiarity of it all. Part of me thought, maybe I could forgive her. Maybe we could work through it, go to counseling, rebuild what was broken. But then, every time I thought about staying, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. Could I ever trust her again? Could I ever look at her without wondering if she was thinking of someone else? Every moment, every glance, every interaction would be tainted with doubt, and that's no way to live. But still, the idea of being alone, it felt like jumping into an abyss. What if I left and never found someone else? What if I spent the rest of my life wondering if I made the wrong choice? The fear of the unknown was suffocating. I wasn't a young man anymore. Starting over at this point in life wasn't something I ever planned for, and the thought of rebuilding from scratch made my chest tighten. But staying felt like slowly suffocating too. Could I live with the betrayal hanging over us? Could I live knowing that she had already made her choice to step outside of our marriage? Every day, I wrestled with this decision. I weighed the memories we had against the pain she caused. I thought about the life we had planned and the future we no longer shared. It felt like no matter what I chose, there was no winning. One path led to a life of constant suspicion, of pretending everything was fine, when deep down, I knew it wasn't. The other led to loneliness, to uncertainty, to a future I couldn't picture. I was stuck. Every time I thought I had made a decision, the fear would pull me back, and I'd find myself right where I started, confused, heartbroken, and unsure of what to do next. When you're in a situation like this, you start realizing how much you need people. I couldn't keep everything bottled up anymore. It was eating me alive. So, I did what I hadn't done up to that point. I reached out. First, to my closest friend, John. We'd known each other for years, since before I even met Lisa. I figured if anyone could help me make sense of things, it'd be him. We met up, and it didn't take long for me to spill everything. The affair, the confrontation, the uncertainty. I just laid it all out there. I expected him to give me a clear answer, to tell me what I should do. But instead, he just listened. And when he finally spoke, his advice wasn't what I expected. You've got to think long and hard about whether you can ever trust her again, Mike. If you can't, you're only going to hurt yourself more by staying. But if you think there's a chance, if you still love her enough to try, then maybe it's worth fighting for. That hit me hard. Could I trust her again? I didn't know. But the idea of walking away without at least trying, that didn't sit well with me either. Then there was my sister Sarah. She was the complete opposite of John. When I told her, she was furious. Michael, you deserve better than this. She betrayed you and you're still thinking about staying. She doesn't deserve your forgiveness. Sarah's words were sharp, but they came from a place of love. She hated seeing me hurt, and she didn't want me to make the same mistake twice. And then there was my mom. I called her one evening, not knowing what I really wanted from her, but just needing to talk. She's always been my rock, the one person who could steady me when I felt lost. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the sadness in it. "You have to follow your heart, Michael. I know this hurts, but only you know what you can live with. If you think you can heal, then you should try. But if you can't, you have to do what's right for you." Everyone had different opinions. John was neutral, Sarah was angry, and my mom, well, she just wanted me to find peace. And that's when I realized something important. No one could make this decision for me. It was my life, my marriage, my pain. I appreciated their advice, but at the end of the day, it was me who had to live with the choice. Still, talking to them helped. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. No matter what happened, I had people who loved me, people who would support me no matter what I decided, and that gave me strength. After talking to John, Sarah, and my mom, I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. I had to make a decision, not just about Lisa, but about myself. For the first time in a long while, I started thinking about what I needed. Not just what would keep everything from falling apart, but what would actually help me start to put myself back together. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like a battle between staying stuck in the past and trying to take steps forward. But I knew that if I kept holding on to the pain, it would consume me. So, I started focusing on me, on what I could control, on who I wanted to be beyond this betrayal. I started small. I'd go for a run in the mornings just to clear my head. There was something about being outside, feeling the ground beneath my feet, that helped me shake off some of the weight I'd been carrying. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It gave me something to focus on that wasn't tied to Lisa or the past. Then I made a point to reconnect with old hobbies, things I'd let slip over the years, like working on the car in the garage or reading a book just for the sake of it. These small acts of self-care began to remind me of who I was before everything fell apart, and more importantly, who I could be moving forward. But the real change came when I stopped blaming myself. For so long, I had this running list of all the ways I thought I'd failed, all the things I could have done differently. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't all on me. Sure, I wasn't perfect. I had my flaws, my mistakes, but what Lisa did, that was her choice. Her betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth. Once I accepted that, I felt this shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. I had spent so much time questioning myself, doubting everything about who I was. Now, I started to rebuild my confidence. Little by little, I began to look at the future in a new way. What did I really want? For so long, I thought my happiness was tied to the life I had with Lisa. But now, I was starting to see that my happiness had to come from within. I wasn't going to wait around for someone else to make me feel complete. And as the days passed, I felt lighter. Not completely healed, but stronger than I had been in a long time. I realized that I had a choice. I could let this define me, or I could use it as a turning point, a chance to become someone better, someone stronger. That's when I knew I was going to be okay. Maybe not right away, but eventually. I had a long road ahead, but I was ready to walk it. I wasn't looking for anything. Honestly, the idea of meeting someone new wasn't even on my radar. I was still working through my own healing, trying to find some kind of balance in my life again. But as life often does, it threw something unexpected my way. Her name was Emily. We met through mutual friends at a small gathering. Not some grand romantic setup, just a casual, friendly environment. I wasn't expecting much, and I definitely wasn't ready to jump into anything serious. But there was something about her, something easy and genuine. She didn't come with any pressure or expectations. She was just there. At first, I kept my distance emotionally. It wasn't that I didn't like her. I did. But after everything I'd been through, I was cautious. I wasn't ready to open up completely. The scars from what happened with Lisa were still fresh, and the thought of putting myself out there again terrified me. I didn't want to risk getting hurt again. But Emily was patient. She wasn't pushy or overly eager. She gave me space, but at the same time, she made it clear that she was there if I needed someone to talk to. And slowly, over time, I started to let my guard down. It wasn't easy. Trusting someone new after what I'd been through felt like walking a tightrope, unsure if I'd fall. We started seeing each other more, grabbing coffee or taking walks. Nothing serious at first, just getting to know each other. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized how different things felt with her. There was no tension, no hidden agenda. She wasn't trying to be anyone she wasn't, and neither was I. It was refreshing. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could be myself again. And I didn't have to constantly question her intentions. There was no guessing, no wondering what was going on behind the scenes. Everything was out in the open, honest, but trust. That was the hardest part. Even though Emily hadn't given me any reason to doubt her, I still found myself hesitating. Every now and then, those old fears would creep in. Would this end the same way? Was I setting myself up for more heartbreak? But then I'd remind myself that this was different. She was different. And so was I. I wasn't the same person I was before. I had learned from my past, and I knew what I wanted, what I deserved. Emily wasn't Lisa, and this relationship wasn't tied to the mistakes of the past. Slowly, I began to realize that I could trust again, that maybe, just maybe, I could let go of the hurt and let someone new in. It wasn't perfect, and I still had a long way to go. But meeting Emily showed me that there was hope, that there was life after heartbreak, and maybe, just maybe, I could be happy again. It's strange, looking back on everything now. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be here, feeling at peace with myself, I wouldn't have believed you. The heartbreak, the betrayal, it all felt like too much to bear at the time. But now, standing on the other side of it all, I realize how much I've grown, how much I've changed. I've come to understand that happiness isn't something you wait for or expect from someone else. It's something you have to find within yourself. I spent so long thinking that my life's happiness was tied to my marriage with Lisa, to the plans we made together. But losing that, it forced me to look deeper, to find happiness that wasn't dependent on anyone else. Meeting Emily helped, of course. She's been a part of this new chapter in my life. But more importantly, she's shown me that trust can be rebuilt, even after it's been shattered. But what really changed wasn't just finding someone new. It was rediscovering who I am and what I want out of life. I don't need anyone to complete me. I'm whole on my own. I've learned that forgiveness, true forgiveness, starts with forgiving yourself. I had to let go of the guilt, the blame, all the things I'd carried with me from my past. Only then could I start to heal and move forward. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Now, I wake up with a sense of peace I didn't think I'd ever feel again. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but I've found a new kind of happiness. It's quieter, steadier, built on a foundation of self-respect and the lessons I've learned along the way. As I stand here today, I know one thing for sure. I'm stronger than I was before. I've faced the worst of it, and I've come out the other side. And for the first time in a long while, I'm truly content with where I am and where I'm going. Life doesn't always turn out the way you expect, but sometimes that's exactly what you need.